So, what's up? My name is Jared Olson. I am a graduating senior, and today, here for our virtual Honors Day presentations, I'm going to talk about my experience over the last year covering social movements and environmental strife in Central America as a freelance journalist, something that I've done largely through Flagler Research grants. So, to begin with, why Central America? Why journalism? Why all of that? Well, I started getting into journalism because I'd always loved writing and storytelling. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I love reading books. And journalism is an ideal avenue to couple this love of storytelling with an impulse for social justice, a desire to tell people's stories, especially when those people are oppressed or forgotten in national discourses. So, why Central America? I'd been covering Latin America, traveling to and writing about Latin America for a while. I had actually gotten my start with journalism through Flagler College through a program called the Pulitzer Center. I got a grant to go travel on my own to Mexico in the summer of 2018 to cover the Zapatistas, a peasant movement, for over a month and a half. And that really piqued my interest in covering social movements, people, the underdogs fighting for social justice in a lot of these countries. Why Central America specifically over the past year, where I've traveled 3 times alone? Central America figures immensely into our national subconscious and imagination. Turn on any cable news station and it's likely that you're going to hear about immigration. But it's very rare that people talk about why immigrants come here, the kind of structural reasons causing violence and poverty, forcing people to flee. And as a journalist, I want to illuminate the structures, help make it clear why people are leaving, and then put a human face on that so people can understand and be a little bit more sympathetic to immigrants leaving. So I've gone 3 times in the past year. The first time I went to Guatemala to cover something called pirate radio stations run by indigenous people. Indigenous people don't have a very happy history in the last 200 years in Guatemala. They were enslaved or de facto enslaved by the Spaniards. They suffered immensely during a civil war. One side was financed by the United States, and indigenous people suffered what many people called a genocide. But out of the ruins of this war, which has created the sort of militarization and violence which forces many people to leave, many indigenous peasant groups formed what are now known as radio comunitarias, community radios, which speak in indigenous languages as opposed to Spanish, which you only hear on corporate radios, and which speak of subversive political narratives that help poor people in that country in ways that you don't hear on radio stations that are run by corporations out of Miami or Mexico City and that are deeply seated with the oligarchy in that country. So that was a really powerful experience reporting on that. The second time I went to Central America in the last year was when I went to Honduras. Ever since a 2009 military coup that was supported by the United States, Honduras has been alternatively ranked between Syria and Afghanistan as one of the most violent countries in the world in terms of its total murder rate. So I wanted to go and I wanted to illustrate why this is happening, to put a human face on that. So the first time I went to Tegucigalpa, started spending time with anti-government activists in the capital. I traveled around the country with a guy named Lenin Lainez, who was an opposition politician and the youngest congressman in Central America. We went actually to his rural home village close to the border with El Salvador, and it really gave me an impression of why people struggle so hard to make a better life for themselves, to fight against a U.S.-backed government. His village was overrun by gang members, and the Honduran military, which comes oftentimes to extort people, never helps people fight off the gang members. So this drove my friend to fight against the government. And then finally, I ended up landing an interview with the ousted ex-president of Honduras, Manuel Zelaya, who had been thrown out in the coup. I don't know how I got that interview, but it was a really powerful experience speaking with him. And then the last time I went to Honduras was this December. Through my contacts that I had developed in this second time in the country, I had heard that there was an upspike in violence in this one place called the Aguan Valley. The Aguan has a history of conflict. It is home basically to resource conflicts. And over the past 10 years, about 150 people have been killed by paramilitaries associated with the local oligarchy and the federal government in that country, right? Peasant leaders getting just picked off for fighting for land and water. And so me and this photojournalist went to the Agwan Valley over December because we found there'd been an upsurge in this violence because of the imposition of a poisonous mine that was threatening to destroy the watershed in the region, upon which the local peasants depended for agriculture, for drinking, for spiritual sustenance. 8 of them have been killed, many more imprisoned, and they're constantly harassed by members of the Honduran military who defend this corporation which is building this mine. It was an incredibly powerful experience to be able to speak with these people in these villages, these rural hamlets next to this imposing mine infrastructure, destroying their environment, hearing these intimate and terrifying stories about how they're struggling for a better world, a better community for themselves, even against overwhelming odds. And I returned back to the US and was able to publish that story in The Nation magazine, which is the oldest weekly magazine in the United States. And I was really proud of that, and it was a really moving experience to be able to hear their stories and then translate it into something for a wider audience, because no English language journalist had covered that conflict. So I hope to be able to continue doing these things again. I think that journalism which seeks to shine a light on other people's voices in an era of xenophobia, when you're told that it's okay to refer to other humans as illegals, that kind of journalism and that compassion and sympathy is a really powerful antidote to that. Storytelling, I think, can help lay the groundwork for change and a better world, and that's why I've done what I've done, and Flagler has helped me do that. Thank you.